Okay. Here you go, Sal. You want to be on camera duty? No, don't. Tell me. Go away.
All right,
Take
Sam.
a hike. Intern walking in here.
Make me proud, Papa.
All right, here we go.
You want the curtains closed?
No, I like the curtains open. I like to feel in
Rob
tune
wants to
with.
come in.
No, Rob can't come in. Oliver Stone's coming in. He's an old intern. No. He can come in later. Sal, you got that taken care of.
Yeah, bro.
Apparently, ladies and gentlemen, this is the after show, and I'll be interviewing Oliver Stone today. As he comes in. This is a test for me because.
You kill it.
You think so?
Kill it. Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Rolling.
Are you nervous?
No. I mean, because what's the worst that's going to happen? Have a shitty interview with Oliver Stone, everybody laughs at it anyway, so.
Sam.
Yeah.
Since we got a moment, can I just hit the intro so we can separate this?
No. This is.
It's going to sound so awkward when we cut it up.
All right. Let it sound awkward. I like that. It should be awkward. All right. This isn't my fault. You can sit him in a guest seat, not the merch chair. There's like 50 things. Oliver Stone's making his way in.
I've been on this show before.
But not with me before.
No?
No.
I've been in this room.
You have been in this room, Mr. Stone.
How are you?
Welcome. How are you?
Who are you? What's your name?
My name is Sam Roberts.
Okay.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Huh?
Who are you, though? Opie?
No. Opie, I'm filling in for Opie and Anthony.
Oh, what the hell?
Well,
I came to see Opie and Anthony.
I know, we all did, but they have a stringent schedule that they have to adhere to.
Oh, shit. Is that the ones I talked to before?
Yes.
Oh, too bad.
That's all right. They wanted to give me a turn. You have fun. Don't worry
Your
about it.
name is Sam?
My name is Sam. I'm happy to have met you.
They may listen to the show.
Yeah. Oh, there's tons of people listening. Everybody
on
who
yet?
yes, we are. We're live.
We're live all this time?
Oh, yeah.
I walked in.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why people listen. They like the realism and the naturalness. And you have to be excited. Is it nice to be able to go out and have a ton of stuff to promote? Do you like that?
No.
You don't like that?
I am not a very good promotional person, but I try. I feel like we make a best effort.
Do you like working on a lot at once? Or do you like? Do you tend to just
be
focus?
Retired, wiggling my toes in the ocean, and just taking it easy with beautiful girls around.
See, that sounds great, but I don't believe that because
No, it is.
anybody who wants to be retired, I would think, isn't going to
What's
say.
wrong with retirement?
I think it's a good thing, but I don't think that somebody who wants to be retired says, "I want to make a 12-hour documentary on America."
Me. Believe me, after doing that, I think I met my maker. You know, that was a tough one.
Yeah. Now you strike me. I was watching. Yeah. Go ahead. Put the headphones on. Join the show. Have a great time.
Yeah, good
You
idea.
strike me.
Give me a coffee.
Yeah.
Just come from Democracy Now! With Amy.
Somebody bring Mr. Stone a coffee.
I've been at it since 7 this morning
Jesus. And how long? All day press?
and all night.
All night tonight too?
I was hanging out last night.
This is what happens.
When you get to New York. I did Piers Morgan last night.
How was that?
9 to 10, and then I did Piers is great. You know him, right?
Yeah, of course. He's been in before.
A very charming man.
And you guys are probably line up the same on a lot of your opinions politically.
Possibly.
I would think so.
We didn't get to the bottom of that.
How difficult is it for you to try to separate? Because I watched the Untold History of the U.S.
Right.
I've been watching it. It took me several days.
Did you really? Oh,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fabulous. It's very few people actually sit and watch because it's really
It's a lot.
a lot of work, and it's a movie. It's a real movie.
But it is good in the sense that like you're telling stories. You know what I mean? It's not that sort of. You don't feel like you're in history class.
There's no as a documentary, there's no talking heads, which
Yes.
always slows down films and make these heavy, tedious points. I mean, it is a flow. It goes like poetry. The imagery, the cutting is like JFK. Remember the scene in mixing documentary with narration. It flows. It's got poetry.
And you did an amazing job of the found footage that you got, not just in the newsreel stuff, but in the animations and the sort of like the World War II stuff where Russia's taking over all the land and everything. I would assume most of that was not originally produced for you. It was of the time.
Actually, we looked for all the maps we could get, but some of them are difficult to render. We also did modern maps, which is to say we went back into those eras and we did modern creations of those maps, which are even easier to read for the audience because maps are crucial to understand. The biggest land grab was the British Empire, let's be honest. When you said the Russian Empire, it was the British Empire that had the most amount of territory.
Now, how long did this take, the whole thing? from start to
5
finish?
years, off and on.
Off and on, though.
Yeah. I did W. I did Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, and Savages, as well as the South of the Border. But during this period, I was always working in terms of going back to history.
And did you treat, because the documentary is broken up into 10 and then on the Blu-ray 12 chapters.
Right.
Did you treat them like individual pieces when you were building it, or did you treat it?
Everyone had to be 58 minutes and 30 seconds. It is a discipline. It's like television.
Right.
You have to tell set your hook, sell the story, and you have to stick to the big picture, what you think is the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
All this has been fact-checked more than once. It was a tedious rewrite job, and to simplify, I mean, you see the prose. I mean, the book is 800 pages. How to get that down to 58 minutes for each decade is the key. So you have to stick to the big picture, big narrative line. And we use movie clips, don't forget. And they're very helpful to cut through because the movies are of that time.
Right, and it kind of like, they'll show whatever, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or whatever movie that relates to the era and the issue that they're talking about. How hard is it for you, though, to remove opinion? Because this is something you're passionate about. And obviously you have opinions on the stuff, and the opinions do bleed through, and that's part of what makes it Oliver Stone's.
Good. Well, Sam, I have to say really that I approached this with a historian. I never considered myself a historian. I was a dramatist. I was dramatizing history, but I worked very closely with Peter Kuznick, who wrote the book with me and wrote these chapters. Now, he had a staff. He was an American University professor of history. He taught it for 30 years. He's a director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American. He's specialized in the atomic bomb and scientists and everything we did was just refined and refined. Now, there's a body of facts. We select the facts that we think are important.
Sure.
And we give you, there is a flow, and at the end of each chapter, or sometimes in the middle, we do speculations and opinions, as you say.
And as I was watching, I mean, and the kind of overall thing, like, it's no secret to me that you were not a fan of Harry Truman, for example.
I think we did show you a body of evidence that he was not the man that you thought he was.
Right.
That he was not up to that vision that Roosevelt had started and stood for as the Grand Alliance between the Soviet Union, the British, and the Americans.
So, and is that a goal of yours for people to come out?
No goals. There was no goals. I mean, Peter has been studying this thing, felt strongly about the atomic bombs, that the two original atomic bombs did not have to be dropped. But we made our case. And by the way, I would like to say this is not Peter's history. He studied under the revisionists. The revisionists came into being really around the Cold War, but they started writing. A lot of them were younger, and they started writing in 1959. You had people like Fleming, like Gar Alperovitz, Richard Appleman, William Appleman Williams, Lloyd Gardner, Gabriel Kolko. It's a body of history that we built on. It's not like we went out there and decided to attack Truman. That's what you make it sound like. It's not at all.
No, I just feel
Truman
like
had been attacked. And Walter Lippmann, who was one of the great minds of that era, was very critical of Truman's doctrine, the Truman Doctrine, in March 1947, giving $400 million to Greece and Turkey, saying, look, we're going to be fighting communists and terrorists. He used those words, everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world. He made it a principle, basically. And by doing that, he was fighting the people who had, in fact, fought the Nazis in Greece. You have to understand, it was a huge... At that time, in 1947, that was a divider, and people of Walter Lippmann's stature were attacking Truman. So we're not out there in left field coming at you and saying we're doing a rewrite job on Truman. This stuff is old. It's been written about, but it's been ignored. And basically, the American government and American history has moved to the right. And the so-called assumed evidence has moved more and more to the right. We're trying to do justice to history and say, no, keep in mind what was really happening in that time period.
Where do you think network news now leans? Obviously, you have a channel like Fox News that I feel like unapologetically leans to the right. But do you think that...
we're living in an age of, it's hollow news. I think you have to study history. Yeah. You can't get the patterns of things. You can't understand what's really happening unless you look at history. Right?
Well, yeah, and part of going through all the documentaries is that you kind of see where things start to change, and you kind of see after World War II, things become shrouded in secrecy, and there's a lot more.
Right away.
Yeah. Do you think, though, First of all, do you think we're also promoting JFK, the big director's cut Blu-ray box set, huge thing that's coming out on Tuesday, the 50th anniversary of JFK's death? Do you think that was an inside job? Do you think
You're
there was
jumping around a lot here.
I know.
Yeah, but in historical terms, it's very. I don't know how serious you want to get, but look, Truman comes along, and we go quickly from a World War II situation. We accelerate into a national security state. Eisenhower comes into office in '52 and continues the growth of that national security state. We become armed to the teeth.
And the thing that was interesting about Eisenhower is when you watch it and you see in the context, you see that this is where this whole trend of going into countries and overthrowing leaders and all that started.
Yeah, under Eisenhower and his and Secretary of State Dulles, we had a huge interventions in Iran, in Guatemala. We tried in Indonesia to get rid of Sukarno. We tried to get rid of Lumumba in Angola.
Yeah.
And in Vietnam, we participated with the French. We supported their war. We financed most of it. Nuclear threats were made against China, were made against Russia. Eisenhower is not at all what he seems, although at the end of his regime, he does, in his farewell address, he does address that horrible issue about the military-industrial complex, which he helped create.
Yeah.
We went from approximately little more than 1,000 nuclear weapons in 1952 to approximately by 1962, he under Eisenhower's budgeting cycle, 30,000 nuclear weapons. We were 10 to 1, at least 10 to 1 stronger than the Soviet Union. Although the Soviet Union was pictured as threatening to us.
And it's insane, too, when you think about it in the context of only a few years before that, the whole idea of a nuclear bomb was this sort of foreign sci-fi movie weapon.
Well, that was the Jewish scientists in Europe had been developing it, and we brought many of them to America.
Yeah.
And did it here, and they were brilliant. And what Henry Wallace and Oppenheimer knew was that this was not a secret. Everyone would eventually get it because scientists are brilliant men. They work for different countries and so forth and so on. And there was espionage too. So,
but I ask you about the JFK conspiracy.
Yeah, let's go back to that. But I'm just saying that under Eisenhower and Truman, you have two older men who build up this. We are the most formidable power on earth. In 1960, a young man comes in, and he's facing all of a sudden a military that has essentially reached a place where, and I'm going to cut right to the chase. Their thinking is, look, so we've had 5 or 6 major crises with the Soviets now. The communists are definitely our worst enemies, and we have to deal with this. They are going to get stronger over time. We now have this first strike capability. We can take them out. This is hard thinking now, and we can if they retaliate, we can sustain the casualties. This was the basis of that movie, Dr. Strangelove, which Cooper did so brilliantly. You found that the General Jack Rippers, the General George C. Scott in that movie, they were talking in these terms. Kennedy found himself in a similar situation. He was a bit like that president in the movie. He was more of a peace man, and he did not want war. He did not want to support the Bay of Pigs invasion, which Eisenhower would have done. When we went in there, they needed air support from the U.S. to carry through the invasion. They didn't get it. They thought they'd get it. Kennedy did not give it. He fired Allen Dulles. At that point, you begin to see the split right away between Kennedy and the CIA and the military.
Sure.
That's a big thing.
And so, because I wonder, we were talking about the secrecy that came into the government before, and I feel like as far as grand conspiracies go, especially when you're talking about a JFK, when you're talking about a 9/11, whatever it is, the bigger the conspiracy, the more people that have to be in on this thing. And I find it hard to believe with a lot of these, especially with JFK, it's been 50 years, that nobody would have by now.
Well, people have talked. I mean, there's all kinds of leaks. It's just, you're jumping ahead. I mean, I'm just trying to tell you that let's build the story a little bit so you understand the hostility to Kennedy, because that's what we do in Untold History. We don't go into the assassination.
Yeah, but I don't have 12 hours.
But it's important to understand that Kennedy had made many enemies by 1963 when, he refused to go into Laos. He sent non-combat advisors to Vietnam. They wanted a war. We had built up this place where we really wanted to go to war. We wanted to lock in and do the final solution.
So there was a reason to people not want Kennedy to be in his seat.
I would say.
Yeah.
I would say. And
that's not debatable.
He fired Dulles, and he fired the 3 other top people at the CIA. He thought his generals, he made critical comments on his generals, which is historically factual. But we're not making this up. He was, and by the time of the missile crisis in 1962, after the Berlin scare, we almost had a war in 1961 with the Berlin crisis. And Kennedy said that famous quote. He said, "I'd rather have a wall than a war." He meant it.
Yeah, sure.
So, a nuclear war is not fun. I mean, in Cuba, the 62 situation, it was much heavier than we thought. McNamara, after that crisis, when he found out the facts, that they were much more armed than we thought they were. They had 100 nuclear battlefield weapons, 40,000 Russian troops, commanded by the commander of Stalingrad. The Cubans were 270,000 soldiers, well armed.
Yeah.
We would have had much more casualties than we had planned. We wanted to invade Cuba because if we couldn't invade Cuba, which is 90 miles from our shores, we consider ourselves impotent. With all this weaponry we had, here we were, defeated by a little David. We were Goliath.
You know who you remind me of? You remind me of my dad. I'll tell you why.
Good.
My dad was like, and this is a good thing. My dad was was an ad executive for a long time, and that's he spent all his time at work and everything. But whenever I had history homework to do, that was where he was passionate. I never saw him passionate until he was talking to me about United States and world history.
Right.
And I feel like there are guys like him and guys like you who have these amazing jobs. You're a film director.
Yeah, I have to tell the story.
I feel like your passion, I feel like you should have been a history teacher. Is that something you always wanted to do?
I was. I consider myself a dramatist, but I love history.
Yeah.
And I like to dramatize it. Yeah.
Yeah.
My father was also dramatic, but he was very conservative. So I had the anti-Roosevelt point of view.
And do you think that's
pro Eisenhower?
Do you think that your dad being conservative
Very much
pushed you in the other direction?
No, because I had to find out. It took me until I was about 38 years old. I was not
before you really established a good opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it was slow. It was not easy to do.
Well, were you
I had to go to Vietnam. I had to learn my own way through life.
Were you a history buff growing up?
Yes.
You were. So even in your party days,
I loved the cowboys and Indians.
Yeah,
I did,
yeah.
and I saw the Viet Cong in Vietnam as Indians. Let's be honest. I mean, to put it primitively.
What do you think of the Redskins name change?
I think it would be a good idea. Probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, so. Kennedy had reached a place where, because of the missile crisis, he was considered a soft belly, a guy who could not stand up to communism. He was nobody. He was not of the caliber of Eisenhower.
That was the time to do this war.
Eisenhower told him to go into Cuba. When they had those missile sites in there, and the Russians put him in, he said, "Go." All his older men, Gene Atchison's, all the people, the wise men of our administration said, "Go." But we didn't know what we were headed for. We would have headed for 100,000 casualties probably, and they would have escalated into a massive thermonuclear winter. It would have been the end of civilization as we know it. But we did not know it then. And Kennedy had
We didn't have an idea then that
No, because we really
once you start the nuclear weapon thing,
No, because they didn't think the Soviets had that kind of weaponry. We were 10-1, military superiority.
Sure.
But still, they had subs. They were crude subs, but they would have done some damage.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we would have attacked. We would have wiped out Russia. We would have wiped out China, too, because that was definitely in our PSYOP plan. And we had 600 million casualties planned on that. I mean, Eisenhower had built up this thing. It had been, Eisenhower didn't want to get into a conventional war. He wanted a nuclear war to solve things quickly. He wanted the threat of nuclear war to keep us out of war. But now we'd escalated past Eisenhower to this point where we're willing to use... Curtis LeMay was the Air Force Chief of Staff. Right? LeMay had been the terror bomber who'd wiped out 100 Japanese cities, and civilians were killed and so forth. He had no compunctions about not dropping these bombs.
It's amazing to me that this is all, like, I would think that a person to come into an interview with this kind of information, you'd have to research it the night before and figure it out. But this is all just, all these stories are just right there for you.
Well, within reason. I mean, come on, there's a lot of facts in the book.
There are tons of facts.
I'm trying to cover this in a soundbite. You're telling me, well, I'm trying to say that Kennedy said no.
Right.
When he said no, this was a huge thing. 62 was a turning point. And then within a year of that, he was doing a limited test ban treaty with Khrushchev. Khrushchev and he were moving towards a détente of the Cold War, which is very crucial. He was moving towards, he said that very famous speech, Kennedy called off the space race with the Soviets. He said, why don't we go to space together? He made the peace speech at American University. He's the first president who finally, after Roosevelt recognized the Soviet contribution in World War II, which was to win the war. Basically, they took 27 million casualties fighting the Germans. So, he did a lot to close the Cold War out. He was moving in that direction, and he was stopped cold in Dallas on that day because he would have been reelected. He was popular, by the way, for having said this and done this.
But what do you think? So you think the reason that more hasn't been made of this is because the people who are coming forward with information are kind of being silenced, not taken seriously?
Well, let me finish my point, and you'll
believe it or not,
your questions are refining themselves as you're listening. So,
well, I am listening, but I'm trying. They're in my headphones telling me you have other interviews to do.
Okay,
I would sit here with you for three fucking hours if I could.
The point is that we had an interest in maintaining our superiority, maintaining the Cold War.
Yeah.
And it's a financial interest. We've had a very strong interest in going into Vietnam and staying there and making and creating and fighting communism on all fronts across the world, which we did. Lyndon Johnson, when he took office, continued exactly in the vein of Eisenhower. So, in other words, there's the torch went back to the old men, from Johnson to Nixon to Ford to Reagan. It's a more and more conservative people. This is where in the United States, in that brief 3 years with Kennedy, had a shot to go in another direction.
And that was it.
That was it. And it was the last one, if you look at it. Clinton had a brief moment. Carter had a brief moment. Obama talked that way. But none of those guys have succeeded.
Do you think when these guys come in and talk about it and get you excited, like maybe he's the guy that they're told something that we don't know that stops them? Do you think Obama is shown something behind a door?
Yes, I do think a lot of that goes on. I think you're surrounded as president with military security, intelligence people who are telling you 24 hours a day, focus on this, focus on that. There's a threat from this country. There's a threat on your life. I mean, that's constant. I do think we have a monster shadow government and we can't control. And I think this NSA thing with Snowden and all this stuff, it's out of control. I mean, you have to understand that the more you give the military, the more you give intelligence, the more they take. And they don't know the line. There's no end to what they will do.
Well, listen, they're yelling at me in my headphones because I'm supposed to release you. I would talk to you for hours. I think you're a fascinating man.
I saw you as a hard case. I'm trying to just get you thinking in some new directions.
Yeah, I like it. I like what you do. Now, JFK, 50th anniversary of his death, the commemorative DVD, Blu-ray, everything box set. It's huge. It's in stores on Tuesday. Untold History of the United States, the book and the Blu-rays are out now. In the JFK thing, commemoration is Chapter 6 of Untold History, the Kennedy chapter, which is a great chapter. It is a great chapter, so check that out. Oliver, now let me ask you too, real quick. Are you glad that you made a sequel to Wall Street?
Yes.
You are glad?
I do.
Okay, because a lot of people were worried about it at first, but I think the movie went over pretty well.
See it again. It shows you Wall Street in 2010, and the other one shows you 1987. There's a contrast.
And is the Martin Luther King Jr. biopic, is that happening? Is that the next thing?
I can't say it's happening, but I'm writing.
Hopefully that's your next move.
Yeah.
Oliver Stone, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break.
Sam.
And we'll be back.
The O&A show continues. Sort of. This is After O&A Live. Stay tuned. Alright, well that sucked. To hear the Opie and Anthony show 5 days a week live on satellite radio, online on your phone or tablet, or even on demand, go to SiriusXM.com. Also, interact with the Opie and Anthony show on Twitter, @Opie Radio, @Anthony Cumia, and @Jim Norton.